Well, good evening. Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Wow, it's lovely to be here. Welcome to the Barbican. Lovely to see such a full house. I'm Dallas Campbell, and I'm going to be introducing Tim to you tonight. You've heard of Tim, haven't you? You know Tim. Yes. There we go. It's absolutely wonderful to be here, and also I should say welcome to people who are joining us online, because I know people are watching us on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, so we'll give them a little wave wherever they may be, somewhere in the ether. Quick show of hands. Hands up, everyone who wants to be an astronaut. Anyone? Do we have any budding astronauts? Or should I say, does anyone really not want to be an astronaut? That's me. It's funny, I tell you, being an astronaut, this is something I've learned, is a very, very exclusive club. If you think about all human beings on Earth, there's been about 108 billion human beings on Earth throughout all of history. And yet, throughout all that time, fewer than 600 people have ever made it into space, has ever gone above that, what we call the Kármán line, 100 kilometers, that boundary between the Earth and space. And if you wanted to join that club, or if you wanted to even just understand a little bit about what that club is about, then I urge you to read Ask an Astronaut. Tim's book is absolutely fantastic. All the big questions of life, the universe, and everything are answered, as well as the minutiae of life on board the International Space Station. So if you haven't got a copy of the book, I urge you to get it. But before I bring Tim on, a little reminder of Tim's adventures in space. Okay, a massive round of applause for Tim Peake.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Hey. Hello, Dallas. Good to see you.
Come and join us.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Hello.
You're a rock star. You're a rock star. I got to actually, first question, before the first question, are you surprised by just the reaction that you get coming?
I am.
Turning up into.
I am
places
surprised
like
and overwhelmed and delighted that everybody is so interested and excited about space these days, which is fantastic.
It's terrific. And the book, first of all, congratulations on the book. Has everyone got a copy? Have you read a copy? You got a copy?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, I forgot a little bit of paperwork I've got to do. Tim is going to be signing copies of the book afterwards, and I'll explain how that works towards the end of the talk. So we're going to talk for about half an hour, and then I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes to come up with your own fiendishly difficult and probing questions about space.
Okay.
If that's all right. If it's okay with you, I would like to start on the 15th of December, 2015, at the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
Yeah.
Right here, because we think about the role of the astronaut, the changing role of the astronaut. Can we have our first slide up? Here we go. What's going on here? I mean,
Okay.
is this the day before, or
This
or
is
the 14th?
about this is about 10 days before launch. So we're actually officially in quarantine at this stage. We're in a compound in Baikonur, and it's all behind the wire. This is at the very end of the Cosmonauts Grove. So every astronaut, cosmonaut who has flown from Kazakhstan, from Baikonur, has planted a tree in the Cosmonaut Grove. So this is one of the traditions, one of the ceremonies that we go through before launch is our tree planting ceremony. So that's my tree there.
Yeah. How's it doing? Do you get status updates?
The funny thing is that
trees?
when I first got down there, and I took myself for a little walk along the Cosmonaut Grove, and this was when I first got there on my backup launch. So it was in the summer. 6 months prior to this, and I was having a look at all the trees, and they were marvelous. And then I was looking at some of the European astronauts, and I noticed that my friend Luca's tree wasn't there. Luca Parmitano from Italy, and he had flown in 2013. And I thought, that's strange. His tree's gone missing. And I did some inquiring, and one of the Russians, the gardener, said, yes, don't get too emotionally attached to your tree. They sometimes move around a little bit, and some of those ones don't make it through the Russian winter.
Well, this is the thing, and also the steppes of Kazakhstan. It's not ideal tree planting weather because it's pretty bleak and barren. So this is sort of 10 days before. I think the thing that most people get surprised when they understand what a launch is like, it's just how many superstitions the Russians have when it comes to launching. And there's another one here. This is the signing of the door. So
that's
again,
right.
every astronaut has to do this.
Yeah, this is the Cosmonaut Hotel, so that's my room, and we each get a room up there. So that's the door that all the other astronauts and cosmonauts who've stayed in that room have signed before leaving. Yeah. And actually, as you mentioned there, there's just under 600 people have gone to space. There's actually a whole load of doors that have been filled up and are downstairs in the basement.
Just like lying there.
This is probably about door number 5 for that room that I'm on there.
Tim and I were trying to work out exactly how many people have gone into space. We were there's discrepancies over the number. I think 554. It's between 554 and 550.
That's right.
Depending on where you go. This is my favorite one. So this is a Russian. This is you being blessed by the Russian Orthodox priest prior to launch. So this is a big part of the Russian tradition of spaceflight, isn't it?
It is huge, yeah. So this is now getting really close to launch. This is probably about 4 hours away from launch. So we've actually gone through all of our morning medical routine. We've been sterilized. We've been scrubbed down, having had the showers. We've had our enemas, which is probably more information than you need.
Right. It's good. I tell you, there's a lot of bowel chats.
But we are ready for space, and we're in our sterile white long johns there underneath our blue flight suits, you can see. And the funny thing is that having gone through all of this sterilization and body cleansing process, a Russian Orthodox priest gets up there with his bucket of water and then just completely sprays us down with water.
And is there any sort of choice in whether this happens, or is this you just have to kind of go along with it because this is the way it's done?
You kind of go along with it. If you really did object, then they wouldn't do it, but we go along with it.
I mean, we should point out that the only way into space, not the only way, but the only way to the International Space Station at the moment is on Soyuz, since the space shuttle. So all nationalities now fly on Soyuz. They all fly out of Baikonur. It's not just the Russians.
That's right, yes, since 2011, yes.
Yeah, okay, so we've got the blessing. And then let's just talk a little bit about this. Because I mean, you always, when I've heard you being asked about how do you feel going out to the rocket, and I know you've obviously had an enormous amount of training, it all feels second nature to you, but is there a sense of trepidation, I suppose, a sense of fear? Because there is risk when you are riding a rocket, when you're strapping yourself to a Soyuz.
There is risk, definitely, but it's something that you deal with long before you get to this point, on the bus.
Yeah.
So having had that blessing, we then go downstairs. We've jumped on at one bus. We've gone out to building 254. We've suited up. We've gone through the whole process there. We say goodbye to our families behind the glass, which is it's completely public affair because you've got the presser there.
I was there. I was there, yourself, kind of being annoying.
It's a very awkward conversation. But as you saw that you're sharing one microphone between the 3 astronauts, all trying to kind of say these last words to your family, and before jumping on the bus and then heading out to the launch pad. So yes, there is an element of apprehension, but you're more worried about your family, about who you're leaving behind. And I think every person I've spoken to who's flown into space We deal with any apprehension of the rocket and of what might happen to us long before we ever get close to the rocket. But knowing that you're putting yourself in a place where you cannot help your family, if something goes wrong with your family back here on Earth, that's the really worrying thing.
So the rockets, you're fine with it at all?
Absolutely.
I kind of, you can imagine going through so much training, but actually seeing it for real. Whatever you do in life, you can rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, but actually doing it for real, not even a flutter.
No, honestly, I mean, a flutter of excitement, yes, but not of fear or worry, which I know some people think that, you know, come on. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, I mean, anybody who sits on top of 300 tons of explosive rocket fuel and who's not afraid, or some part of you, but that part of you that's afraid, like I say, it's been long dealt with, and now it's just pure adrenaline, it's pure excitement.
And this is the moment where you're saying goodbye to your boy.
Yeah, that's right. So
my
2 boys, Thomas and Oliver, you know, just saying those last farewells, and that is the toughest thing I've ever had to do by far. Is knowing that you're putting your life at risk and you're going away for 6 months, and saying goodbye is a very hard thing to do.
Let's have a little. You mentioned. This is the bus itself. So this is you all fully suited up. I'll just talk about the bus. So as well as, even though you've been wearing sterile long johns, but you've then been sprayed by a Russian Orthodox priest, one of the other great traditions, of course, is the peeing of on the back right tire of the bus, which again, as you hear this, is like, wait, I thought space travel was all shiny silver spacesuits, and you drive in that bus to the launch pad, but then halfway you get out and have a pee, because that's what Yuri Gagarin did.
That's what Yuri did, yes, on his way to the launch pad in 1961. So, and we stop at exactly the same place. It's just before the bus crosses over the railway tracks, and this is the railway tracks where the train actually carries your Soyuz rocket from the hangar where it's assembled. And the Soyuz, unlike the American vehicles like the Saturn V and other rockets which are assembled vertically, the Soyuz is assembled horizontally, and so it's then put on a train, and the train pulls it out to the launch pad.
Yeah.
And so just before the railway tracks, the bus stops, and we jump off, back right tire, and we have a pee on the tire, and then frantically do our suits back up.
Because those suits, they take a little bit of doing up, and they've spent so long in kind of masks and surgically fixing them up for you, then you just go and unravel them.
I know, yeah, and it's quite funny. There's a lot of things with the Russians and the traditions that you mentioned that you just go along with, and you know that there might not be a huge amount of logic watching these engineers in their masks and their sterile gloves who are suiting you up, knowing that you're going to be unsuiting yourself in 20 minutes' time to have a pee.
I should move on. I'm slightly fascinated by this. I'm really sorry. If you're a lady, what happens? Are they allowed to opt out? Or
so ladies, if they like, they actually carry a little pot of urine with them so that they can splash it. So they can splash it on the tire.
Funnily, I actually have one. And hang on.
A pot of urine?
Well, actually, this is the great. We actually have a suit behind us. I don't know. Should we pull it out and have a little look, just so you can. Everywhere I go, I always carry a spacesuit with me just in case. So this is it. This is the suit.
The so-called spacesuit.
This is the so-called suit.
Absolutely. So the bit I was referring to there is inside. The way we get into this thing is we actually climb in it through this hole here. And this is all rubberized to create a pressurized seal. So we put our legs in, and then we duck our head down, pop our head up into this bit here. So this is the bit that has to be folded really carefully in like a concertina fashion. And then once you get it all scrunched up, we have two very technical pieces of equipment that seal it up, which are called rubber bands. And I kid you not, 2 rubber bands go around this thing, and that's what saves your life in the event that the spacecraft depressurizes. So this is what we're having to undo and get out of.
I love, this is the good, solid Russian engineering. Rubber bands, they're brilliant. If one breaks, you just get another one. Can you hold that? No, I better not give that to you. And I should say as well, this isn't the spacesuit that you did the spacewalk in. This is just for the Soyuz, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So we have 2 spacesuits. One of them is the spacesuit we wear in the vehicle that takes us into space to the space station. And again, on the space shuttle, the NASA astronauts, that was the bright orange ones that they would wear as well. They're much softer, they're lighter, and they're not designed to go and keep you alive out in space. The spacesuit that we wear on a spacewalk is a completely different kettle of fish. It's a huge feat of engineering in itself.
There's a lot about spacesuits in the book.
There is, yes.
Let's move on, because I want to get to the launch itself. So this is you guys waving your last goodbyes. Am I right in thinking, and someone told me this, but it might be a lie, that when you get the guy who shuts the door of the rocket is the same guy that's been shutting the door since Yuri Gagarin's day, since 1961. And I'm like, really? I was trying to work out, he must be ancient.
He certainly looks like he has been, yes. But
Someone
I think
told me
he's been
that.
doing it for a phenomenally long time. And that's also the person who opens the hatch when you land in Kazakhstan. Again, it's been the same person for at least 30 years.
It was Richard Garriott, the astronaut, who told me that. So
Right.
I don't know whether... He's a reliable source of information. So there we go. So this is actual launch. Now, it's a fiery affair, a Soyuz launch, very different to a shuttle launch. A lot of fire. It's an extraordinary sight. I don't know what it was like for you guys sitting in it, but I was about 750 meters away behind a kind of grotty barbed wire fence.
Yes.
And it's, apart from the noise, but it's so bright, you can't even look at the flame as it takes off.
You get a lot of visual pyrotechnics there. And the reason is they don't bother dousing it with water. So, for example, again, the shuttle launch, you had this massive vehicle going off in the shuttle. And so to try and reduce the noise and also the flame, they would throw water at it. So they would douse the flame with water. They don't bother doing that out in the desert of Kazakhstan. And so you get these very visual pyrotechnics.
I wonder if anyone's been to a launch. Has anyone actually been to a launch? A couple of people there. If you haven't been for a launch, I've got a very special treat for you. So this is Tim on his way to space. But we recorded, when we were there, we actually recorded with some very, very good microphones what a Soyuz sounds like. And we're going to play it for you. So this is Soyuz launch from 750 meters. Take it away. Enjoy yourselves in the booth at the back. You can, up to Soyuz 11 we want. So this is... is the most immense sound, and I'm guessing you don't hear it like that at all where you are.
No, well, we hear a lot of that, but it's actually more muffled inside the Soyuz because we're wearing our communications cap there. But the interesting thing is what you hear there at the beginning, and I've thank you very much for recording that as well because I've played it so many times and used that. It's the best recording ever of a Soyuz launch. And when people hear it at first, they think, well, that's not very loud. And then it really kicks in. And what happens there is the Soyuz rocket actually goes to just intermediate thrust for 5 seconds, where we're checking out the engines, we're making sure everything is running okay, and then it goes to full thrust. So that first part of the audio clip is, just an intermediate thrust, and then the full thrust kicks in, and then it goes off. Very loud.
The whole system, the way it launches, is so beautiful. Again, a bit like your rubber band on the spacesuit, that sort of simple Russian engineering. I could go on for hours about how it works, and it is a beautiful thing. There's lots more about it in here, but we have to press on because I want to know about your first day in space. I want to know about, when you go to school for the first day and it's all a bit nerve-wracking, and you're prepared and you've done your homework, but still, what was it like the first moment you opened the door?
The first moment of opening the door was brilliant because it was just so much, you can see by my face there in the picture, so much fun to finally be on board the space station, something that I had dreamed about for years. And then to be able to embrace my crewmates there who I had trained with, especially Scott and Nisha, who were, been up there for 9 months at that stage, and Sergei Volkov as well. So that first feeling, it was just of an absolute elation, really, getting on board and saying hi to the gang. But it was also really bizarre, meeting other people up in space and just as if you just arrived on some sort of taxi. It was very strange.
Because it's much quicker. It used to be a couple of days to get there, and now they get you up there in a few hours.
It used to be 2.5 days. Now we do it in 6 hours. So a 4-orbit rendezvous, and we're going to try a 2-orbit rendezvous very soon. So we're going to cut it.
When you say you, am I involved in this?
Oh, I'd like to be me. That'd be great. Yeah.
And because obviously you've trained on the ground in simulations on the station on the ground, but being weightless for the first time and suddenly not having walls and ceilings and doors, how did you cope with that? Can you remember that first moment? Was your head doing somersaults? Were you nauseous? Because a lot of people get space sick, I know.
So I didn't get space sick in the first 12, 14 hours at all. It was just really great fun being in weightlessness. But I was amazed at Yuri because, no sooner had we got into orbit, the commander has to get out of his seat, he has to go into the habitation module, he has to start doing some checks and drills and then come back down, hatches going. And when it was my turn to get up out of my seat, I was all over the place. This whole weightlessness was really weird. And of course, Yuri's on his 6th trip into space, so for him, he's an old hat. It's like riding a bike. So it does take a while to get used to it. And you'll see, you haven't got the photo up there anymore.
Here we go.
The first place you go into on the space station is the Russian segment. And the Russian segment is a much narrower diameter. It's much smaller, as you saw from the picture there with me and Scott greeting. And that's great because you don't want to be in a big volume when you first get into weightlessness. You want the walls very close by so you can grab a handrail.
And does it do something to your vision? I mean, what's it like to actually see to actually see depth whilst being weightless?
Yes, it doesn't do anything too bad when you're moving slowly in a narrow diameter, but when you get into the American segment, which is much bigger volume modules, the problem is that you can sometimes misjudge the hatch height. So if you're whizzing around, you think you're going to make it through the hatch, and the next thing you know is you've clunked your head because you didn't quite get it right. And that happens 2 or 3 times when you're in your first week normally. Yeah.
So here we are. So this is the whole team, and I guess we're phoning home. This must be pretty early on.
Yeah. So this is, because we had a bit of a delayed docking, we had to have a couple of attempts at the docking. So by the time we got on board the space station, we were a little bit behind schedule. So we all went straight to the Russian segment, and this is us doing our call to family and friends who are back at Baikonur.
Fantastic. Let's have a look. Now, you've obviously made yourself at home from those sort of first tentative footsteps. I mean, your day-to-day life on the space station was extraordinary. I mean, obviously, there were things like this. It wasn't just science. You had an opportunity to do all kinds of outreach and events and marathons. But this one was particularly odd. Was this the Heston Blumenthal?
This was the space
food
dinners.
tie-in?
One of the interesting things about space food is that 10% of your food allocation is given to you to decide what you want to take into space, which is brilliant, because the other 90% is not so good.
Well, we've got some here actually. So this isn't. What do we have here? We've got
something with mushrooms.
Yeah, green beans and mushrooms.
Green beans and mushrooms, yeah. So it's not the most appetizing food. Often it's very bland because a lot of salt content is reduced so that it doesn't exacerbates bone loss, which we don't need in space. And so to have this extra 10% of bonus food allocation is brilliant. And I decided to hand that allocation over to a competition for school kids to design a healthy, balanced, nutritious meal for an astronaut. And then the winners of the competition got to cook it with Heston Blumenthal. And that was what I was eating in this picture here. The funny thing is that T-shirt, that tuxedo T-shirt, when I actually packed it up in my bag about nearly 2 years prior to when this photo was taken, I had no idea what I was ever going to wear it for. But I just thought, I'm a British astronaut going to the space station. I need a tux just in case. And it worked out perfectly.
How was the food? I think the idea of space food is things like this, that somehow space food is just about keeping people alive. But if you're doing long-duration space flight, as any explorer would tell you, your whole morale is influenced by what's for dinner.
It is.
So you need to have proper, decent food up there.
You do, yeah. It becomes really important. Even as someone like myself, and I'm not very food motivated, after a few months in space, you're right, the meals do become very important.
Yeah.
And you start looking forward to them. It's your way of connecting back to Earth, back to what reminds you of friends and family and the whole social environment of eating. It's very important.
And things like fresh fruit and vegetables. Presumably, you're only going to get fresh fruit and vegetables when a progress or a supply crafts comes from Earth. Do they put in some fresh fruit for you?
They do, and actually here again, I have to take my hat off to the Russians. They are able to pack their cargo vehicles and close the hatch much later. So the last thing they do is fill it with fresh oranges, onions as well, is popular with the Russians, apples, and then the hatch is closed, and then literally a day later it launches or so. With the American vehicles, the hatch has to get sealed up a few days in advance.
Yeah.
So the food often wasn't quite as fresh, but the Russian vehicles, we had really good fresh food on.
And when you open that Russian supply ship, do you get a waft of fresh fruit? I mean, I can imagine sort of citrus fruits.
Yes, you do. Yeah, and the smell, it just permeates through the entire space station. It makes you realize that we spend all our time up there living in this very kind of sterile environment, and when you get a fresh earthly smell on board, it's quite wonderful.
So here's a little bit of science. So how much of your day is spent doing science? How much is spent taking photographs? How much is spent on Twitter?
So,
and so, I mean, only because I think in the old days, if you think about the 90s on the Mir space station, pre-digital revolution, it seemed that astronauts were isolated. We didn't have that same kind of connection with astronauts that we have now. Now, of course, we're bombarded with photographs and all this amazing work that is done.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's just go through. Is that you? Was that?
Yeah, that's right. So we probably spend about now, I would say, about 50% of our time doing science. And about 30% of our time doing maintenance activities, because the space station is it's 20 years old next year. So it does require quite a bit of maintenance. And then the remainder of the time is doing other tasks, management conferences. We obviously have to do fitness training and other activities like that. But no, science is becoming, as the space station has come to completion, obviously in the first 10 years it took, a lot more maintenance was being done. Yeah. Since the space station finished its construction, we're spending more and more time doing science activities.
Yeah, and we should just talk about why is the science, why do we need this scientific platform in orbit? Like, what is, for those who are wondering, what is the point of it? Why can't we do the science down here?
So I think the point is twofold, and that there is definitely fantastic research that we can only do in microgravity. And yes, we can do that on Earth in parabolic flights or in drop towers or sounding rockets, but you can only do that for a matter of seconds to experience microgravity on Earth. So if you want to have experiments run for a long period of time in microgravity, then space is the only place you can do that. And we talk about microgravity, and people are like, well, what is that? Well, it's basically weightlessness. As something is dropping in constant free fall around Earth, that's the environment we call weightlessness. We call it microgravity. And things change. Lots of things change, which we shouldn't be surprised about, really. I mean, if you change the pressure of something on Earth or the temperature, you wouldn't be surprised to find a change. So when you change gravity, we shouldn't be surprised to find changes either.
And it's quite extraordinary, just the variety of sciences that you guys do. I mean, it's life sciences, it's material sciences, it's physics, it's the whole gamut, it's the whole pantheon of science is being done out there. It's an extraordinary thing. Just this, we have a Mars rover, I think. Was this you?
Yes.
And Stevenage, talking to the Mars yard in Stevenage.
Yeah, so this was me going about 27,600 kilometers an hour, driving a rover that was going about 0.03 kilometers an hour, which is painfully slow. But my task here was to drive this rover into a cave that was in the Mars yard in the Airbus plant at Stevenage, and to try and identify some targets. The point being is that as we go onto our future space exploration, astronauts are going to be controlling lunar rovers, and we're going to be controlling Martian rovers en route to Mars, en route to the moon, and in orbit around the moon. So we're testing out all sorts of command and control techniques for how we're going to do that.
We're going to talk about that in a minute. That's the exciting bit. If anyone watched the BBC program Astronauts, one of the tests, did you see that? One of the tests they did was they had to do that. They had to sort of drive the little rover into the cave and identify some rocks and then come out before the battery ran out. That's my idea of hell, actually. Just for me, like working a PowerPoint presentation is my idea of hell. Having to do it like whilst floating, yes, not for me. Now, what have we got here? Yes, fun in microgravity. Yeah. What percentage of your time is just mucking about? Because for me...
I'm not sure I'm going to answer that question.
It seems like they work you pretty hard up there.
You do. You're there to work hard, and no one complains about that. That's the whole point of being up there. But the whole time, weightlessness is just a fun environment to be in. So brushing my teeth was great fun. I mean, doing somersaults, looking out the cupola whilst brushing your teeth. Every day, eating and drinking, you can have fun. I mean, no one's going to tell you off for playing with your food up there. So we play with our food. Yeah. It's great. You can have enormous amounts of fun all the time up there.
I mean, when you talk to the astronauts of 20 years ago, particularly I think the American astronauts who were on the Mir space station, did they have was it much more difficult for them, do you think? A completely different kettle of fish? Because you have so many more facilities on the ISS than they ever had on Mir. Something like the cupola, for example.
Yeah.
The cupola is the big window where you can look down on the Earth. Having that visual connection to your planet, how important is that for your psychology?
I found it really important, not just for the psychology of being able to look out the window and enjoy planet Earth all the time, but also because I became really passionate about taking photographs. And so for me, that became a real hobby, a great pastime that I enjoy doing. What was interesting was for the last 3 weeks of the mission, we had to seal up all the hatches on the windows. And so I spent the last 3 weeks of my mission without having the cupola or any windows to look out of. And that it suddenly became a completely different space station.
Really?
You suddenly felt very isolated. It made you realize that when you go on a trip to Mars, you're going to be in a different psyche to the one we're in when we're in low Earth orbit.
Well, we'll talk a little bit later about it, but the fact that you're in low Earth orbit, the Earth is always there. It's big in your field of view. As we move on to Mars and suddenly the Earth becomes just a tiny point of light, that is going to have an effect on us, I suspect.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. I mean, the good thing is you'll still have the sunlight, but of course it'll be permanent sunlight. You'll never go into the shadow of the Earth. So again, that will be difficult to get used to.
And lots of other problems, which we'll come to. Here we are. Out of all the sciences, what was did you sort of become an expert in a thing, or did you develop a particular interest in a particular area?
I love the life sciences because we're up there to be guinea pigs for the life science. So many changes to our body happens with our cardiovascular system, our bones, our eyesight. And so we're constantly doing ultrasounds, we're doing eye tonometry, we're doing all sorts of medical testing, taking blood, taking urine, etc. So the life sciences became really interesting to me. So I enjoyed that probably the most.
And then there's the day-to-day stuff. And I'm sure I'm going to wait for somebody to ask the great question of you know what. I'm sure somebody will ask it. But things like cutting your hair, the things that we take for granted.
Yeah.
Do they become more difficult or just different? Because I could imagine sort of picking up a glass and you expect it to drop.
They become different. I mean, some things are actually really easy. I mean, here's a drink. Here's a grapefruit drink, but that could easily just be tea with milk and sugar. How easy is it just to put it up to a hot water container, shove a straw in, and there's your cup of tea?
I was quite upset about your tea in space because apparently you had cream in it. There was and
unfortunately,
I'm like, come on.
that's the only thing they have. Yeah.
How did it taste? Was it all right? The tea.
You get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And now this is what we have here, the Calcutta Cup. Again, a great connection with Earth. It's not like you are working in isolation, even though you're 250 miles away. You are part of things and being part of the events that are happening on Earth.
Yes, and again, that was as important for me as it was, just for my enjoyment as well. I love rugby, and I had the opportunity to watch some of the rugby matches up there, which was brilliant.
I can't remember who won. I'm a Scot, so I'm guessing we didn't win.
I think that's probably why you've erased it from your memory. Yeah.
Oh, and then he runs a marathon. I can't even do a marathon on Earth. How was it more difficult than running a marathon, or was it easy?
It was much more difficult in terms of the pain on the shoulders and the waist. We have this harness system that keeps us stuck to the treadmill. And we can run with about 70% of our body weight. That's about the maximum loading we can get on this system. Yeah. And I started out and I had the full 70% on. And it felt fine for the first hour. But then, after about an hour and a half, this harness became my nemesis.
You had to do it because we were all watching.
Everyone was watching.
Did you feel that pressure? Because the thing is about an astronaut, the role keeps changing. In the old days, it was just staying alive and working equipment. Then it's like you had to be an explorer and a scientist. Now you've got to be a TV presenter as well. It's like you kind of have to. And
it's very, excuse me, it's very public life up there. The cameras are always on.
Were you aware of just how public and just actually how the fact that you had really grabbed the public attention, particularly in the UK.
I mean, you're not aware of it when you're up there working so much, because you're still only communicating with a small team at mission control around the world. But and the only information that comes up to you is what somebody might email, or you might catch on a snippet of news. So you're still quite isolated as to what's going on back on Earth. And I think that was that became really clear to me after the spacewalk. We were so busy in the build-up to the spacewalk. And then I went and did it, and then came back in. Tim and I were drying the suits off, having a cup of tea, talking about what went wrong at the end of it. And then I went into my crew quarter, and I checked my emails, and I was like, wow. And I suddenly saw people, my ground control team had said, okay, Tim, here's a few of the responses from around the world for your spacewalk. And then it really hit me. Just how important it was.
It was quite extraordinary. We're going to get onto the space. I'm going to flick through a few of your amazing pictures. I don't want to spend too much time on these, but they are beautiful. You say that photography became a... there's one I particularly... I mean, they are just extraordinary, particularly these ones. Actually being able to see the aurora from and actually a star field against a black sky. How black is space?
It is scarily black. And this is obviously a night photo. In the daytime, we just see black ink, that's it. You don't see anything. But at nighttime, you can catch the Milky Way rising, and here, we only, from the cupola window, you only see the stars in a small horizon there. It's up to about 40 degrees above the horizon, and the space station blocks your view. So it's actually very difficult to look out into space. So that's why our photos of stars always have the Earth in them. But absolutely magnificent.
But do you get that sense of, astronauts talk about this overview effect, this seeing the Earth in context against the universe? Did you have that feeling?
You do, yeah, very much so. More so on the spacewalk than from inside the space station. I mean, I really felt that out on the spacewalk when suddenly you can look around, all around you, and that's when you get the perspective. Definitely.
We are, where are we? There's Victoria Park. We're about there, I think, or maybe about there. There we go. Yeah. It's absolutely wonderful. For me, this is my favorite image of the whole, partly because I live in London, so I can actually see my head.
Yeah.
So it's an extraordinary photo.
The interesting thing with a photo like that is it takes about 300 shots to actually get one in focus, because moving at such a speed, at 25 times the speed of sound, and you can't stabilize the camera. You're just having to try and track the object and take photographs.
That's
very hard.
Cripes, we've got to move on. I want to talk about the spacewalk, because obviously this was, must be the highlight of the entire mission.
Yes.
So this is you in the American spacesuit. This is the American-made spacesuit.
Yes.
The moment you opened the door and you went outside, just talk us through that feeling.
Yeah, so actually opening the door was the moment when I really relaxed, because that was when it was finally time for Tim and I just to get on with the job that we've trained for. Up until that point, there is a fair degree of apprehension. I would study the route. I'd go to the cupola window in the days before the spacewalk, and I'd be studying my route, thinking about handholds and, am I going to be able to reach that from that? I did equate it to, a rock climber. Studying your route and working out how you're going to do things, what position is my body going to be in, where's this big piece of equipment the size of a small fridge that I'm carrying? And so I had all this information in my mind as to how it was going to happen. And the more you think about it, the more you worry about what happens if something doesn't work out quite right. And then finally, when the hatch opened and we went out into vacuum, that was brilliant. It was just like, finally, at last, let's go and do the job we've trained for.
Was it how you imagined it to be?
It was way more than I'd imagined it to be. Just the whole feeling of being out there, the feeling of isolation and the feeling of exposure, but not in a bad way, but just in an awesome way. I use that word in its true sense of the meaning. It's absolutely awesome to be out there and to be able to see the whole planet beneath you.
And obviously, you were working. Did you get a moment where you could actually just, a few seconds of just taking it all in and going, oh my goodness, this is what it is to be an astronaut suddenly when we think.
So I had a few moments at the beginning of the spacewalk because Tim's job, we go out and we have to tether our safety cables to anchor points. So he had to go out first of all. It took him about 10 minutes to get to the anchor location. So I had those first 10 minutes of hanging out literally beneath the airlock and being able to just get familiar with my surroundings.
Do you feel that you have to hang on in case you fall off? I mean, my brain, I think, imagining what it might be like, would think, oh, well, there's the Earth below me.
So,
and I'm above it.
yeah, I think, you do initially, it's very easy to grip on too tight. I'd been up there for a couple of months before the spacewalk, so that really helps because you're very used to weightlessness by that time.
Yeah.
And you know how little force you need to hang on to something. But there are definitely times when you start getting a bit more white-knuckled than others.
And is it dangerous? I mean, if you hadn't tethered on, if you were somehow floated off, I mean, you have emergency little jets in your spacesuit just in case.
Yes, yeah, we have backups, but it is inherently dangerous. Yes, it's probably it is the most dangerous thing I've ever done. And falling off the space station is frighteningly easy. You've got these clunky gloves that is sometimes very hard to grip. Sometimes you are really reaching, further than you probably should, and sometimes with a little push and a little grab to get somewhere. And if you did slip off the space station, yes, you've got a safety tether that would keep you latched on. But you would come off and you could do untold damage to either the space station or the space suit. You could, crash into something and rupture your suit, get a hole, depressurize your suit. So coming off the space station is definitely a very high-risk activity. We try to do everything for that not to happen.
That great image of Bruce McCandless floating in his sort of jetpack spacesuit from the space shuttle, whenever that was, in the 1980s,
Yes.
1990s. That doesn't happen anymore. There's no.
So he's
no zipping
a
about.
real unsung hero of mine. Yeah, Bruce McCandless. To actually go out there on a MMU, manned maneuvering unit, a few hundred meters from the space shuttle bay, just absolutely incredible.
I want to talk about that for an hour. Okay, I'm going to move on. So spacewalk, love it, brilliant, dangerous. But the return, and I'm going to open it up. Let's just talk us through, because from what I gather, it's a bit of a white knuckle ride coming back on the Soyuz.
It is. It's about an hour and a half of very little happening. When you undock and you go through that first orbit, and really you're just going through checks and drills, and then suddenly everything happens in a short space of time. The moment you do the deorbit burn, this is where you turn the spacecraft around 180 degrees so that the main engine faces the direction of travel, because of course you want to burn the engine to slow down this time, not to speed up. So we slow down, and that lets gravity, Earth's gravity, bring us into the top of the atmosphere. The moment we've done that deorbit burn, we are coming home. There's no two ways about it. You're not staying up in space anymore. And the timing of that deorbit burn has to be perfect. To the
And is that Yuri?
That's automatic.
All done.
But we are monitoring the systems, and if the engine fails at any time, we have to very quickly get onto the backup engines and do the burn on the backup engines. My job was to do the mental arithmetic to work out how long we would need to burn the backup engines for, and anybody who's ever taught me maths would just be thinking, oh my God. I pity that crew. And I was there with my pencil and paper ready for doing all this mental arithmetic. And again, no calculators at all.
That's the bit that scares me the most, is the mental arithmetic. It's not the falling off the space station. It's having to do sums, I think, is
sums in public.
And actually, the Soyuz, it's sort of three parts of the Soyuz, isn't it? And it's only that middle bit where you guys are sitting that comes back. And when those bits separate, it all sort of separates. But it's explosive bolts that pull it apart.
That's right.
Are you aware of the whole thing coming apart?
Oh, hugely. I mean, it's a heavy machine gun going off right next to your head. It's about 14 pyrotechnic bolts, all in sequence. And that, like true good Russian engineering, it's very solid, so it blows itself apart when it separates. Having done the deorbit burn about a quarter of a way around the Earth, we then separate the spacecraft. And then just the descent module that you see here, that's the only bit that actually makes it back down to Earth.
So here we are, you're back down on the steppes of Kazakhstan, on your side. I mean, is it a big thump when you come down?
It's a huge thump, yes. You have these soft landing thrusters, which they do actually cushion the blow, but it's frightening to think what it would be like if they didn't have those thrusters, because even after they operate, it's still a real smack into the ground, a real car crash.
Yuri Gagarin ejected. He didn't even land with his space. He had to eject, sort of I don't know what.
That's right. They
even
came down
more
on a
terrifying.
parachute.
Man, crazy. And here we are. Now we are we've managed to get that for the nation. It's now the capsule is on tour. I think
the Science Museum in London, and it's now on tour around the UK.
The moment you opened the hatch on the way down, did you get that sense of being back on Earth? What was your first reaction?
I was hoping for it, but it didn't really happen because the moment you open the hatch, you just get burning grass coming in, and the smell of scorched capsule coming in. It's really pungent and unpleasant. And so I had to wait until we were actually carried out into the seats to get that lovely first earthly, fresh smells of the steppes of Kazakhstan.
And there we are. And actually was there a great sense of being heavy again?
Huge, And now at this point here, I mean, I'm smiling, but really inside I'm screaming because the whole vestibular system is messed up.
And here you
feel
are.
very, very heavy.
I mean, I know you had a lot of help getting back to normal again, but did it take a long time to get back to?
Well, actually, surprisingly not. I mean, in this case here, I mean, that's my flight surgeon, Sergey, helping me there, but I could walk at this stage. I didn't need them there. They're there just to stop me from falling over in case I trip. But actually, this is quite remarkable. Just a few hours after landing, having been in space for 6 months, you're strong enough because we exercise up there, so physically you're strong enough to walk. Your balance is what your brain is rapidly trying to relearn your balance again. Yeah. But you just feel pretty terrible. Your vestibular system's all messed up.
Bad hangover, kind of.
Really bad.
I'm going to open it up for questions, but I want to just talk very, very briefly about the future. Like you said, the ISS has a shelf life. It's not going to be out there forever. Now, NASA particularly has been talking about the journey to Mars for many, many years, but all the talk now is about going back to the moon and having something like an orbiting lunar facility, a bit like the ISS, or even a lunar base, perhaps.
Yes, yeah. So this is actually, they're working in parallel. This is in order to take us to Mars. Yeah. But we're going to use the moon as a stepping stone to Mars. And what we see up here is the Deep Space Gateway. Now, this is actually being built right now, and so is the SLS rocket that's going to start assembling the Deep Space Gateway. The first of these missions, this uncrewed mission, will go off in about 2019, 2020. And then a couple of years later, we'll send off the first crewed mission.
Are you slated for a ride? Or,
who knows?
I don't know how the politics of all that works.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll be able to? Can you imagine yourself, in all reality, stepping foot on the moon, perhaps?
I would love to. Now this is going to be in my career time frame. Yeah. We're talking about this being assembled by 2025, 2026. And European Space Agency is very much a part of this. We're a partnership. We build the service module for the Orion spacecraft. We're building components of the Deep Space Gateway. So Europe is involved in this whole exploration strategy.
I was very lucky to actually go to the European Astronaut Centre and try their lunar virtual reality, where you can explore the lunar surface. And it's absolutely, for a moment, you're standing on the moon. It's extraordinary.
It is. It's incredible.
I'm going to pause there because we've got 15 minutes or so, and I desperately want you guys to be able to answer some questions. So if we have the house lights up. Now, if you're in the dress circle, there's a couple of microphones on the edge you might just see, which are in the spotlights there. So if you've got a question, if you're very exactly right, there's a young man there. And we've got a couple of roving mics down in the stalls, and at the back, way up there in the gods, there's also a couple of mics. So I'm going to take a question from the stalls first. And my question is going to be to this young man in a white shirt or a spacesuit here. If we could get a microphone down to this young man here, and then we'll move up. How long have we got? We've got a few quick questions. Yes?
What's this key thing that made you want to be an astronaut?
The key thing that made me want to be an astronaut? Do you know, for me, as a test pilot, the main thing was the feeling of exploration and pushing the boundaries. I spoke a lot tonight about the science involved in the space station, but the space station is there for more than just science. It's there because we want to explore. We want to go further. We want to go to the moon. We want to go to Mars. And I spent a large part of my life as a pilot and as a test pilot. And as an astronaut, that's what I got really excited about. It was working with those cutting-edge technologies, pushing the boundaries, and being able to take us further out into space. That's what excited me.
Right, way up there in the dress circle. Yes, hello. I can see you waving.
Hello. My name is Isaac, and I am 9 years old. My teacher asked my class to think of a challenge and how to overcome it. I put down that my challenge was to become an astronaut, and I would overcome this by working really hard and being accepted into the NASA space program. My teacher wasn't happy with this. she said we were supposed to pick something realistic. Well, you were once a 9-year-old boy. My question is, when the people around you were telling you it was impossible, and during the time that felt like they were right, how did you stay motivated and never give up on your dream to become an astronaut? You're my hero, Tim Peake.
Thank you, Isaac.
Isaac, that is brilliant. Isaac, somehow, I think you're already the kind of person who knows not to listen when people tell you that you can't do something. Yeah, I mean, no one has the right to tell anybody that they can't do something. You've got to focus on your dreams, and you've got to stay positive, you've got to stay motivated. Your dreams might change along the route. For me, I wanted to be a pilot, as I said before, and in those early days of being a pilot, I never thought I would make it all the way to being an astronaut in my 30s, but I did. And that's from somebody who left school. I didn't go to university, left school with A-levels, 3 A-levels, and joined the Army. I think really the key is to just have your self-confidence in your own abilities in what you can do. And it sounds like you've got that in spades. So well done, Isaac.
Good luck, Isaac. Good luck, Isaac. Okay. Yes, way up in the upper circle.
Hey, Tim. Can I just start by saying thank you so much for inspiring everybody in this room, and particularly for all of our children. It's such an inspiration. It's really, really cool to see, so thank you for that. And my question is, for the United Kingdom, do you think we're doing enough to produce more Tim Peakes?
That's a good one.
That's a very good question. Yes, I think we're getting there. There's always more we can do, and it's always a balancing act of resources, of course. There's not a bottomless pit of money, and we need to be careful about the money we spend and the projects we spend it on. But the great thing is that the UK is a huge member of the European Space Agency. We're the 4th largest member. We have a booming space industry, and we are absolutely cutting edge and leading the world in areas such as telecommunications and small satellites, for example. We are crying out for more engineers in this country, more scientists, because we have this massive skills shortage, because our industries are doing so well. We now need to grow this new generation of scientists and engineers. And from that, as we haven't got this picture up there, but it showed that picture we had of the Deep Space Gateway, and I mentioned that Europe is building parts of that. Yes, we are. We are involved in these deep space exploration programs. So I think we're definitely on the right track. And again, it's a case of managing resources, but yes, we are getting there.
Good question. Exciting times. Let's go over here. Someone, because we've been over there. I'm going to pick somebody. This little chap here, just there. Can we see? Yes. I can tell he's got a good question.
What game do you play in space?
What was that? What made me stay in bed?
What was the what?
What games do you play in space?
Oh, what games do you play?
What games do we play in space? That's a good question.
The one I was interested in, because Scott Kelly in his gorilla suit. Now, what was going on there?
Well, Scott Kelly's gorilla suit took me by surprise because...
Do you know about this story? Scott Kelly, the American astronaut, managed to take up a gorilla suit with him.
Yeah, and when he told me that, I didn't believe him.
Yeah.
Because you can't get a gorilla suit in space.
No.
Unless you're Scott Kelly. And you obviously have people that you know who pack up the spacecraft and manage to get one. But when he turned up in Node 3 and he really was fully clad in a gorilla suit, I was just beside myself in hysterics. But to come back to your point about games, we had a set of VR goggles. In fact, we had 2 sets of VR goggles, virtual reality goggles up there. And this was for a very serious science program. We were actually, the purpose of these goggles was modeling the interior of the space station so we can use virtual reality for people back on Earth to help us with things, and it worked brilliantly. But the best part was that the designers had put a Space Invaders game into the software logic. And Scott had been testing this out, and he had found it, and he said, hey, Tim, put these on. And so there was one point where Scott and I were in the US laboratory with these sets of VR goggles on, playing Space Invaders, and it was just the most amazing thing to be in space in this VR world playing Space Invaders.
I read also in your book that on your movie night, someone had Alien as well. And various...
Yeah. It's like being in Antarctica and watching The Thing. I guess.
Exactly.
But, yeah, we have Gravity and Aliens on the movie list.
Although the craziest one was Michael Foale on board the Mir space station. They had an accident on the Mir space station, and a couple of weeks afterwards, they got it all fixed. They watched Apollo 13 to relax. It's like, well, you know. Anyway, yes, let's go over to the dress circle. The dress circle. Yes, hello, up there. Yes. Sorry, I don't need to walk over there because I can see you from there.
My name's Isaac, I'm 10 years old and I want to know...
Wait, another Isaac? Not the same Isaac who was over there. He was 9 years old. Okay, different Isaac.
How long did your marathon take in space?
How long did it take? Gosh, well, in terms of distance around the Earth, I guess it depends how long it takes you to run, but I managed to do my marathon in 3 hours, 35 minutes. And... Thank you. But I was actually planning on doing it in about 4 hours because I thought that was a fairly respectable time and I hadn't been training that much for it. But the funny thing was, as this harness hurt more and more, I sped up. My ground team misinterpreted this as Tim doing really well, and it was only later that I told them that the blood was completely cut off and my fingers had gone numb, and I needed to finish the race as quickly as possible. That they got mildly concerned.
Did you enjoy it, or was it just horrific? Were you like, why am I
did enjoy
this?
it. The thing I really enjoyed the most is whilst I was running the marathon, I had a laptop in front of me, and NASA Mission Control in Houston was streaming up the BBC for me, so I was actually able to watch the London Marathon on the laptop whilst I was running it, so that was really cool.
That's good. Okay, we've done the dress. We're going to go. Let's go over there, the top gallery. Or did we not do that side? I can't remember.
We haven't done this side.
We haven't done that side. Come on, then let's do this side.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm 9. And my question is, do you prefer space or Earth?
Hi, Rachel. I better be careful what I say because my wife's in the audience. So, no, space or Earth. There's Dallas and I were talking about this beforehand, but there's not an astronaut I've spoken to who doesn't miss space. It's an incredibly wonderful place to be. It's very difficult to describe. It's not just the view of space and the feeling of weightlessness, but it's also the sort of calm serenity that you get orbiting the Earth and seeing that viewpoint. But Earth, if people say, what's your favorite planet in the solar system? Well, it's Earth. There is nowhere more beautiful that I have ever seen than this planet. So if you ask me what's best, space or Earth, it would definitely be Earth.
Good question. Okay, we've got time for one more question. I don't want the children to explode. Where's the exploding child? Okay, the exploding child can find me the exploding child, and they can ask the question.
My name's Abby and I'm 6 years old. And my question is, when are you going back to space? And I love you, Tim Peake.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. Was that, when am I going back into space?
What was the question? We love Tim Peake. Yes, we know that. But what was the... yeah, well, let's ask that.
When are you going back to ISS?
Oh, when am I going back to... That's what I thought it was. Thank you.
Yes.
When am I going back? Well, I'm hoping to go back before 2024. That's the plan. So myself and my 6 colleagues from the European Space Agency, we each have a second mission, and the space station is going on at least till 2024, but I'm not sure exactly when in that time frame.
So your little group of 2009, the Shenanigans, you're called, aren't you? So
yeah,
everyone's flown once, and everyone's on their second go. So you're down. Do you have a flight yet?
I'm not. Alex launches in May next year. He'll be the first of the 6 of us. Then Luca is after him, and then we'll all sort of take our turn after that.
Fantastic. If you want to know what life is like on the International Space Station, I tell you what, I read that, and I got to the last page, and I in my mind, I kind of could let go, and it would just sort of float off. And annoyingly, it fell to the ground. But I kid you not, you will know so much, the detail that has gone into this book, Ask an Astronaut. It's absolutely phenomenal. So I urge you, if you haven't read it, read it. We're going to wrap it up. I've got a little bit of housekeeping to say. There is going to be signing for 1 hour. Tim's going to be behind in the space behind the hall for an hour. and no more. So there's not going to be a chance to do photographs, I'm afraid, or family snaps, or swapping emails, or any of that kind of stuff. It's going to have to be very, very quick signatures, and then he can get as many done as he can. The staff from the bar, don't rush out yet. The staff from, don't, sit down. I haven't finished yet. The staff from the Barbican are actually going to hand out raffle tickets to try and keep a little bit of sense of order. But please, a huge round of applause for Tim Peake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks very much. Thank you.